Transport. Sorry, just click that. Yep, joining us from UCL, Centre of Transport. And he's part of the Safer Up project, and he's here to talk about his research on healthy and accessible pedestrian surfaces. So I'm really excited to welcome him here. When I was researching for our potential speakers, I think it would be really good to kind of get an insight into the other aspect of active travel, and that is basically how we interact with the environment and how it affects our bodies. So yeah, I'll pass over to you. And thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Well, hi everyone. So yeah, I'm third year PhD student. Just started my third year. Of course, through the pandemic, things is a little bit complicated. But yeah, I'll make a little intro to my project journals and see how you think, what you think about. Should I share my screen?
Yeah, if you'd like to. Yeah, so we're going to have a little presentation and then hopefully come together at the end for a bit of discussion, questions, and then have some more in-depth discussion between ourselves and just kind of report back and see what everyone's thinking.
Is it working now?
Yep.
Yeah, it's fine.
Cool, awesome. So yeah, this is not working. So just kind of an icebreaker. I think just, yeah. I think the topic I'm working with is pretty much relatable to all of us, or many of us. I think if we look at surfaces, we never think about the pedestrian or the surfaces we're walking on, and we all feel our needs. We all feel different things when we walk on grass, when we walk on concrete, and indirectly, I think we know what's going on with our bodies, but we cannot really tell, and there is no sufficient background yet on this topic, and I think that is part of my interest. So yeah, anyways. So as you all know, life expectancy is increasing. It has increased like 5 years, 5.5 years from the 1990s to 2016. And we're estimating that by 2050, it's going to be as much as 3 times more people over 60, 65. So these together with an increase in, we're constantly seeing now more and more injuries, musculoskeletal injuries. Also, these kind of injuries increase from in the same 15 years by 60%. So that's a lot. So basically, if we think that population also in cities is going to be around 70% of the whole population by 2050 in cities, we can kind of draw some connections in there, what's happening with the environment, what could be happening with the environment. Of course, this reflects in social costs, healthcare systems being overwhelmed, lot of issues. So all the musculoskeletal conditions which affect bones, joints, cartilage, muscles. Within these musculoskeletal conditions, osteoarthritis is the third most important. And within osteoarthritis, knee osteoarthritis contributes by half. So we are talking that musculoskeletal conditions are the first cause of disability worldwide. So if we think about it, then we see that knee osteoarthritis is really a big contributor to the whole disability, let's say, worldwide, due to physical disabilities, basically. So we have genetic factors, congenital, and yeah, basically biological factors affecting osteoarthritis. We have diet as well. We have modern, let's say, nutrition or malnutrition, of course, level of activity and accidents. All these are conditions, basically, and we have environmental factors as well. So one of the two questions I have is, how is this affecting us? How the urban environment is affecting us, basically. So we have these musculoskeletal conditions or osteoarthritis also could be considered as mismatch diseases, which means that our bodies are not capable to adapt to new environments fast enough, and this could be happening. So we've seen in the last 100 years, basically, which is kind of 200 years, the prevalence of these conditions has increased by double, so it's doubled. And this is already controlling for other factors, so obesity. So there is something else going on there. So do we have any evidence or any previous research looking into these long-term effects or possible long-term effects relationship with the surfaces we walk on and our basically our joint health, if we're gonna call it like that, and then could we take opportunities if there is something that we could explore in there, to also look into the behavioral factors. So all of us may think that if our knees are hurting a little bit, we might just go and have a run on grass because it feels simply more comfortable. So yeah, this is the line of thought that is going on with my research. Basically, we cannot, it's basically impossible to study somebody other than with someone for 60 or 70 years in a single surface. It's just not possible. We wouldn't be able to do that. We have a longitudinal analysis studies, and there are several, and that is an approach that could be taken. But it would take from now, if we look at a new study, we need to interrogate people starting now, and this research would be ready in 60 years or 70 years of follow-up. Previous research did not include any questions regarding environment in this kind of specific way as surfaces, but it could be a way to explore it. However, I've taken a different approach, and so basically I'm using the knees and linking this with the generation of cartilage, which is part of osteoarthritis, is how it reflects. I'm using knees as a surrogate variable and see if it's going to reflect the different surfaces. The effects of walking different surfaces will reflect into this. My approach has been focused on simulations, simply because, yeah, again, we cannot do 60 years study in someone. so I just told you about it. If we want to understand, or if we want to have a little bit of an insight of what's going on inside our knees, we would like to model how cartilage is going to behave in time with certain loads, certain forces applied in the knee, internal forces in the knee. Currently, we have software that is capable to of doing that. So basically, I'm going backwards on my workflow. To estimate these internal knee forces, we need movement data, which means motion capture data. And this is basically different. We have different methods to do this. We have different kind of sensors, basically, but we put them in. I don't know how familiar are you, but basically just put in different segments of our body and capture the movement data. Is basically accelerations, and from accelerations, the movement is all the movement of the body is estimated. So more or less, this is what I'm doing now. I have also used pressure insoles, which just give us a little bit more information about the specific gait or the walking. And this is just from the physiological point of view. So we want to understand what happens in time in walking different surfaces, and this is an approach. This is the approach I've taken. On the other side, we have the behavioral component of different surfaces. So, okay. So basically, from two sides, I'm taking how people will perceive walking different surfaces and how the body reacts to different surfaces in a simulation, of course. Well, that's it. So a little bit on my experiment and my only experience so far, because, well, of course, the pandemic hit this year, and I just managed to make a pilot experiment back in December 2019. So what you see in the middle is the setup. We have three different surfaces. I use three different surfaces. The blue and red surfaces are impact absorbing, basically are rubberized surfaces. There is no particular reason to choose these two out-of-the-shelf surfaces rather than just being impact absorbing, and they are available. What I want to capture is what happens between the difference between hard surfaces, which is concrete, and any other impact absorbing surface. That's it. Don't pay too much attention to the numbers and things. So basically, what I did is just I made people walk on different surfaces, measure their movement, capture the movement, and then that data is going to be used, or I'm using it into my simulations. So I got a small sample, actually. So any of this is probably, surely not statistically significant. The sample is 20 people. But I try to cover most of the age range, adults, because I'm not working at this time with kids at all. So we can see, basically from the 20s to 80s. It was a very, very good group. I think I wish it was bigger, larger. But what? So a little bit on what I obtained from this. On the user behavioral side interest, I made one questionnaire, single question. You can see in the bottom. and is simply how we feel about it, basically. On the opposite side, we have a little bit more of a standardized test, which is a visual analog scale for fear of falling, basically. And this is primarily assessing people above probably there's 55s or 60s when some other issues start appearing, how we react, how our reactions or our ability to deal with some situations which end up in falling, basically, or near misses. And the reason for doing this is because at more advanced stages or after one fall or two falls, basically people could start getting less and less active. They start simply walking less because they are fearful to fall or get injured, severely injured, and then that leads us to a lot of complications, healthcare costs, social costs, psychological problems as well. Just leads to many different health implications. So yeah, basically, well, what it's interesting about this is that even with a small sample, it's clear that fear of falling increases with age. So this is more or less already defined in the literature, and I found that it's in agreement with that. And what called a little bit more my attention is that there might be a little bit of a gender gap in here. So basically, all female participants I had presented more fear of falling, or they declared that they were basically, they are higher in the scale as compared with the males of the same or their same age group, basically. So almost twice, which is, I don't know, it's quite surprising. Yeah, I think I don't know if I should probably show you my other results, but basically, this is the behavioral part that probably most of us in this group are going to be interested in. I don't know, but so the part corresponding to what happens inside a little bit inside our body. So don't go too crazy trying to analyze here, but what I'm trying to show you is that you see this number increases as it basically going down in the list. What I found in here only was that the accelerations that have a physical meaning, which is the forces are going to be higher, are higher in the concrete. And the two impact absorbing surfaces, I'm comparing here in the bottom. The softest the surface, the more apart from the concrete it is. So basically, we are seeing the highest accelerations in concrete and the lowest accelerations in the softest surface. That's what it means. There is more behind it, but this is just an analysis. And well, I think I just jumped into this. But basically, I think that there is a lot still to do to understand what's going on, or if surfaces have a possible effect in our bodies. We can't really tell at the moment. There is not enough information in the literature. This is a very first attempt of doing, trying to find out this. Most of the research has focused before on the sports science, or they haven't looked at the long-term component. So still a lot of work to do. I'm currently going through the simulations, what's going on in the knee, and basically processing all the data that I have. So further results probably going to be within some months, and then I'll be able to say a little bit more about it. But from this very small sample, I'm really interested in what happened with the fear of falling. Also very interested in the responses of people, as you can see. I mean, this is just a sample, but in general, I also found that older people, or the older age groups, they didn't seem to be that much in the idea of they would go out and walk more on these surfaces. But interestingly, the youngest participants, they were more keen to take a chance. So this caught my attention. I was thinking that it might be the other way around. I might think that probably other users would be more interested in the surfaces or in these soft surfaces. But it didn't happen that way. So there is something probably contradictory in here, but there is also a big potential, which means that younger generations that might be or get to be more active in earlier stages, they would be drifting away from certain diseases and just keeping a healthier life from earlier. And this could reflect, probably, if there are benefits, it could reflect in 30, 40 years in the next generation. So we have also to think about that, like what's going to happen, what could happen in the future. I think there is probably a behavioral driver in here. But again, the sample is very, very little. And yeah, I have to really look into what happens observing people without just asking the question, but rather what they would prefer if we have two surfaces and what they would choose to walk on. This is more difficult because still these kind of surfaces are not widely available, and comparing this is also at the moment not feasible. But that opens a possibility also for the research, I think. So yeah, something to think a little bit more about. That's it. Feel free, of course, to get in touch. Oh yeah, basically, I look forward to some comments.
Cool, thank you. I think some of that probably went over my head a little bit as a non-engineer, but I did understand the concepts behind it. So that's good. I thought it was quite interesting. I mean, it's probably not really related to what you were looking for, but the differences between people's right foots and left foots on what was it, like the impact and the speed that they were walking on the concrete was
yeah,
so kind of interesting.
Sorry, actually I showed that because, to be honest, that to me is kind of the underlying information. You know, that is not going to reflect into something probably super interesting as you see it right now, but it may with the further simulations. But so yeah, just to have it was just to show a little bit of, because probably I don't know the interests of the group. So if someone was coming from probably sports medicine, biomechanics, something like that, they would get into that. Yes, I think it's just, yeah, the behavioral side is also quite important here. And this is the opportunity that we should also explore. So all these ultimately would reflect lower costs for healthcare systems, the same in also general better well-being from different sides, psychological, physiological. It reflects in different axes, I guess.
Yeah, I was kind of I'm quite interested in the perceptual side. I know you did a bit of qualitative insight into whether people would actually say they would walk more on the more impact absorbing surfaces. I was wondering whether, do you think, like to what extent do you think that is unconscious, that people may not think that the surface is better for them, but they may, like unconsciously, they may feel that their knees don't hurt as much, so they maybe would walk more on the other surfaces. And I guess that's probably the hardest thing to investigate, is actually that. I mean, you can ask people, would they walk more on this bit of pavement? But if it's not it's not like a conscious decision, it's hard to measure that, I suppose.
Yeah, we would really need observational studies, basically, and then that means that we have to have pilots for these kind of things, and of course, what I tested is rubberized surfaces, but I'm not saying that is a solution. I'm just comparing to basically discern within different surfaces, right? So it might be that the surface should be actually not completely flat. There are so many ideas and design things that could go into there. But this is basically a baseline to establish if there is or there could be some difference. If we set a baseline, then many more aspects or variables can get into the
Could I ask a question, Octavio? Sorry, I've got my video off. So a couple bits. One thing is, I definitely notice a difference. Surfaces that seem to have been put over tree pits quite often seem to be a lot bouncier, and I feel myself going over them. I'm like, well, this is a nice surface to walk on. So I wondered if you knew what sort of considerations go into the current selection of street surfaces. Is it all to do with price, durability, aesthetics? Like when a council or a landowner decides what they're going to put down, what sort of things do they think about? And then a second bit of question, which I might get around to, is there any trade-offs between having a nice, comfy, bouncy walking surface and the kind of energy return that you get from that would mean that maybe actually, although it feels nicer, walking would require more energy?
Yeah, both of the points you comment. So basically, I will start backwards. So there is an energy return on these surfaces, absolutely. And the ones that I tried basically come from sports. So sports applications. So from one of the surfaces is like the one on the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. The other one is from a tennis court kind of surface. So yeah, these surfaces, of course, when they compress, they store the energy and then return it to our body, basically, and that's kind of this bounciness we feel. There is a trade-off, of course, because especially this is another part of the research that we have, someone has to do, we have to do, is particularly with wheels. So wheelchairs will encounter that is more rolling resistance to these kind of surfaces. To some extent, of course, it's going to be a trade-off always, right? But yeah, it's going to be an energy increase in the requirements for the wheelchair users, for example. It could happen also with the rollators. I'm thinking about accessibility, and that is an issue. A lot of research has to go into that as well. And the first, I just missed it. Can you just repeat it?
What are the design considerations that councils or landowners would use in choosing a surface?
Of course. So yeah, basically this is, yes, durability, serviceability. There are certain standards, but these are either geometrically constrained or simply by the economics of the servicing. Of course, also in accessibility. I'm not just going with the geometry or with the hardness of the surface of this kind of things, like legibility, how reflective is the surface, the friction, many more things into the design of the footway. But one of the reasons, or the main reason, to get into all this research, apart from just knowing how our body adapts or they don't adapt to certain environments, is because we, in any case that there is some long-term benefit, let's say, call it like that, in our bodies, that has to go into the evaluation, into the economical feasibility of the surfaces, and this is the other point. So all of this is trying to underpin that in case that there are benefits. That is, again, not the only possible benefit, could be also the user behavior side, which means that if more people is going out to walk more often or run a little bit more, we would expect an increase in healthy lives, healthy years of life, sorry, the decrease in the DALIs. I see a question also from Holly. I think you're muted.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, so I guess my question is actually a little bit around the sports science side, because aside from my research, I also work as a running coach, and so I'm often working with runners and talking about trainers and things. And I'm kind of an advocate of barefoot running, and sometimes I see the padded shoes and I think this actually makes people run worse. And so I wonder if that's been a consideration at all in your work. It may be less impactful, but it may also lead to people walking in a less natural way, I guess. And if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I can comment on that also from a personal perspective, because I've been training, or I'm not a runner per se, but I do use minimal shoes basically, and I've been using them for 6 or 7, 8 years, something like that, because of course in previous injuries, etc. So I changed the running form, and basically part of this, because I had a little bit of background, a personal background on that, and this made me reevaluate what happens with the environment. So we are forced to use shoes that are highly kind of bouncy or impact absorbing, soft, but those shoes also modify our biomechanics or internal forces in the knee. So if we think there is a trade-off, and we also that there is a lot of research on that, and there is no definite answer, but at least I'm looking at this from the opposite side. So if we remove the geometrical factor that is affecting or could be modifying our gait, basically, in walking or running. I talk different on walking and running because they are different. But talking about the heel strike, when we always have, when we are walking, the geometry is different. So if we remove this sole, but we transfer the impact absorbing property to the ground or to the surface, that removes basically part of the geometrical issue or the geometrical noise that is the shoe is basically adding up. yeah, it's just a little bit more of an evolutive point of view in that.
Yeah, well, I guess also my experience is that I don't know about walking, but it's probably similar in running. People will tend to run better on more natural surfaces. It's possibly partly due to the shock absorption, although also I think it's due to the variability, which encourages them to move in different ways, which I guess your study, because of the way it's been set up, hasn't managed to capture. But people always will like increase their cadence to how quickly they're moving their feet if they're having to jump over tree roots and little bits on the trail and things, which obviously on a flat, smooth surface they don't have to do. They can just kind of plod. So yeah, it's interesting though.
That is very true. There is literature showing that also for walking, because if we compare walking, the closest is running, but with heel strike, which most of us or most of the people will do. And certainly shot versus barefoot, people start increasing their cadence, which means that they make shorter strides or shorter steps and faster, basically. So that's it. So more steps per minute. And what happens is that that is decreasing the loads. That is decreasing the forces or in the knees. And we are doing that subconsciously, like we don't really know what's going on. Yes.
I'll go again, and other people could think of questions.
Please.
So back in the days when I had a proper job, and I used to dress up to go to the office and not just live in sportswear. How much research is there done on the different impact of different surfaces, particularly if you're walking in heeled shoes and high heels, because it makes a massive difference?
There is, okay, with respect to the surface, I haven't come across with that many papers, specifically with heels and surfaces, but there are a lot comparing heels and basically the racing shoes and sports shoes, and more recently some on comparing barefoot walkers. And there are anatomical adaptations in obviously women, or primarily women, using heels. Basically, the calf muscles are shortened, the tendons as well. So the body certainly adapts to that, and that I don't want to say that that's bad, but it has different effects. Like the loading in the joints is going to be different, and the thing is, we don't really know what's going on with that loading being different. So are you more, would you be in more risk of developing osteoarthritis by wearing heels every day? We don't know. Like this hasn't been modeled. So part of these questions go in the kind of similar workflow that I'm working with, because ultimately you need the movement data, and you can start changing things. You can start changing surfaces. You can start changing the footwear, many things. But the idea is the same. Yes, basically.
I would say from my lived experience, and I guess it's because you have a smaller surface area in contact with the ground, that the surfaces that I found most tricky wearing heels were uneven surfaces. So tactile paving, cobbles.
Oh, okay.
You're really wobbly on them, basically.
Yeah. Now I see what the point was with the surface and the interaction of the small contact point of the heel. And that increases also instability, and certainly you are more risk of having an ankle sprain or something. Yes, that's just another. We could probably look at the statistics of that, but.
I was just wondering, I thought it was quite interesting, and that one of the things you pointed out from the results of your pilot study was that the fear of falling was different between men and women.
Yeah, I was surprised by that.
Is that something that you're going to follow up a bit more in your full study? The aspect of like the difference and also the fear of falling aspect.
Yeah, I really want to look into that. I mean, if there is some gender gap, it's important to know it and it's important to address it. And I have the idea that it is maybe related with bone densities and osteoporosis, which is also a non-communicable disease that might be into this incapacity of our bodies to adapt to the new environments, which means that if we are less active, the bone density starts to decline, just like astronauts. And that's proven that occurs more in women than in men. So I don't know if there is a correlation to that, but I mean, from a sample of 20 participants and having these numbers, and it was a fairly balanced. Let me just, I think it was more half and half or something. I don't think I have the. Sorry about just jumping. Yeah, no, I don't. I think I don't. I don't have it in here. I didn't put it. Basically, it was almost half and half. So yes, I would like to address that, but then of course, yeah, I basically will need again more people and try to repeat these stories, which is a little bit more complicated right now. But the fear of falling, certainly I could do it without.
Did you find as well that, and I know from when I used to work with Living Streets, one of the biggest obstacles to people walking was the actual physical condition of the pavement? You know, it'd be things like, has it got potholes in it? Does it slope weirdly? You know, all that kind of stuff that just happens to pavements over time. I mean, were people mentioning that in your research, you know, alongside the surfacing as well?
Absolutely. I didn't show this question in here. So I made only 2 questions in the questionnaire. One was that, what about the pavements, or what were the conditions on the pavements in their usual area where they live, basically. Yeah, and around half of the people, they basically complained, and mostly older users, but not only older users. Like basically, it was fairly even. But yeah, half of them complained about it. The other ones, it was perfect. So it really changes. It depends on the area. But that is a factor, and I still have to make the numbers for that. I still have to look for correlations of the state of the pavements in the area and fear of falling, which is, but I would expect also some kind of correlations in there.
That's very interesting.
Any more questions from anyone? If not, then I'm thinking maybe we can just go into breakout groups, because when we were talking before, we were talking about how active travel as a research area is so broad, and a piece of research like Octavio's is kind of, for me, would just be summed up in a sentence, maybe in my thesis, but obviously it's very important, and it does kind of inform what we're all doing. So we're thinking if we go into breakout groups and just have a little chat and introduce yourself to each other and what your project is, and talk about how do the themes from today fit into your research, and we'll come back and just kind of see what everyone's been talking about. But Becky, I don't think I don't have the breakout here, so I don't think I can do it.
That's interesting. Okay, let me do that. How many are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I'll do 3 rooms and then I will do 3 rooms if I press the right button. Okay, I'll just open the rooms now. We'll have, what do you reckon, Athena, maybe 20 minutes or so?
I'll do like 10 minutes and just come back and see what's been talked about.
10 minutes today, so
Yeah.
yeah. What? Okay. There we go.
I can see it now, Becky, but not before.
Yes. I realised I've put all the Westminster people in one room together. Never mind, never mind. Right, I'm going to go join. Yeah, if you could join room 1, because I think there's nobody in there from.
Okay.